Joining me now is Tammy Ben-Haim. She's Consul General of Israel here to South India. Appreciate your joining us, Tammy. There's a lot of concern at the moment over the nature of this Israeli offensive and what it could mean for civilians caught in the crossfire. That's the big concern at the moment. How do you respond to those who are saying that Israel is resorting to collective retribution of virtually all Palestinians for what happened, the dastardly attack that took place on the 7th of October?
One, thank you for having me. Second, I just want to point all the fingers that we should be pointing and asking these very important questions to a terror organization called Hamas. The attack on October 7th was a terror attack against Jewish and Israeli villages and towns. It was a massacre, killing, burning alive whole families, killing parents in front of their children, killing children in front of the parents, kidnapping over 200 babies. I'm talking babies, small children and women, the elderly, and other unarmed people, kidnapping them into Gaza, brutalizing them. As we're speaking at the moment, the Hamas terror attack is still going on. And why is it going on? Because one, they're still shooting rockets into Israel, into Israeli towns, into Israeli cities. Right 5 minutes ago, while I was waiting to get on your show, rockets were fired towards Jerusalem. The red alert went off in Jerusalem and into Tel Aviv. Jerusalem is one of the holiest cities, not just for the Jews, but for Christians and Muslims as well, and they're shooting rockets into it. Of course, it's also our biggest city population-wise, so think of what they're doing. So the Hamas terror attack is still going on, and the war Israel declared is specifically targeted at the Hamas. It's not against the Palestinian Authority, it's not against any civilians. It's against the Hamas terror organization. But the truth, ma'am, is
that just like Israeli babies you claim have been held hostage, the fact is Palestinian children and Palestinian civilians are also suffering heavy damage. The images now coming out of Gaza suggest that there are people who have nothing to do with Hamas who are also dying in the conflict. So that's where I come to. Is this now collective retribution for all Palestinians?
It's not collective retribution, because Hamas is a terror organization that targets babies and hides behind babies. The fact that they put their rocket launchers, and people know this, people could have spoken to Hamas about it a week ago or a year ago or 2 years ago. The whole world knows that Hamas puts its rocket launchers in kindergartens, that it hides its weapons storage in mosques, that they hide their commanders and command centers in hospitals. We all know this. This was known to the world a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and nobody spoke up. Nobody went to the terror organization and told them, listen, you're holding almost 2 million people hostages. You're hiding behind civilians. Please get out of Gaza. Please try to help the population of Gaza. The whole world knew that Iran was funding and training and assisting Hamas for its sole aim of destroying Israel. The world knew that the Hamas was taking money and infrastructure given by the international community to help the civilians of Gaza. They took it to build terror tunnels. They took it to build their own infrastructure.
Till a few months ago, Mr. Netanyahu's government was seen almost to be using Hamas to take on the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. That there were reports that suggested that the government of Israel had actively at times encouraged a section of Hamas almost to pose it as a political rival to the Palestinian Authority. What happened on October 7th is horrific. No one denies that, ma'am. What is now happening appears to be a full-scale war in which millions of innocents could also become victims of what is happening. Is that what Israel wants? What does Israel really want?
Of course Israel doesn't want this, because Israel did not start this attack. And the attack did not just happen on October 7th. You yourself said 10 days. The terror attack has been continuing for 10 days because over 6,800 rockets are still being launched as we are speaking into Israel. As we are speaking, 200 babies, children, and women are being brutalized by Hamas. So the terror attack is still going on. And Israel cares for its populations, cares for its citizens. Israel will have to make sure, first and foremost, that Israel is back to being secure and safe. Secondly, we have to make sure these innocent people who were kidnapped are freed. And third, we need to make sure that such a terror attack, and maybe people misjudge Hamas. Maybe they thought they were moving from a terror organization into somebody who you may be able to discuss ruling the 2 million people they're in charge of, ruling them. Obviously, it was a mistake. Obviously, they don't care. They want to destroy Jewish lives, but they don't care about the lives of the people living in the territory that, by the way, Israel is not there. We haven't been in there for 18 years, except for, like you rightly said, 2009, 2014 for limited days. But these limited attacks apparently did not stop them. They gained strength, they gained weapons, and they're trying to kill us. So there's no really a question here what Israel must do.
Is there any possibility, though, of negotiating for the hostages release? In the past, the same Netanyahu government had negotiated for the life of one soldier. Is there a possibility, given that you all claim that there are over 100 hostages at least being held?
200.
200 is the number that is being given by some. We don't know the exact figure. 200 is what we are being officially told. Given that number, is the Israeli government willing to negotiate with Hamas, as Iran claims that end the hostilities and will hand over the hostages? Is that a possibility?
The Hamas at the moment is not even willing to talk to the Red Cross. They're not even willing to give information to the Red Cross. They're not willing to meet with the Red Cross. So if they're not willing to meet with this international organization, that one of their main purposes is to take care of kidnapped people, to see, that people were kidnapped under, they're not willing to speak to them. So I don't know where people are coming up with other ideas. You rightly said in the past, but Hamas can decide right now. Hamas can decide in an hour. Hamas can go and say, here, they're all freed. Stop firing at us, and then check what we do.
Let me get that clear. If Hamas does that, if Hamas says we are handing over you the hostages, will the firing stop? Will there be a cessation of hostilities? Or is the aim to completely dismantle Hamas, whatever it takes?
At the moment, I told you, we have three goals, right? Safety and security first to everybody, Israeli citizens, non-Israeli citizens, Jews, Arab, Muslims, Christians, everybody living in Israel need to be safe and secure again. We need to free the hostages, and we have to make sure Hamas is not able to launch such an attack again. Think about it. Think how many targets of Hamas infrastructure our Air Force has already struck. And despite that, they still have enough rockets to keep barrages onto the whole of Israel, into Tel Aviv, into Jerusalem, to the south part where they also, attacked on Saturday, the 7th of October. Think how many weapons they stored, how much money does it take, how much infrastructure, how much people power that they could have used for the people of Gaza. But they knowingly and deliberately for years stockpiled with an attempt to destroy. They never, they don't care about their people, and they don't do it. Just one more example. Israel already 24 hours ago told the people in North Gaza to please start moving to South Gaza. You know who stopped them? You know who put blockades on the road so these people won't go? The Hamas tried to stop the people, told them you should die as martyrs and stay, and tried to stop them from moving south. And another thing, people were saying that Gaza doesn't have water, doesn't have enough water. Israel today at 9 a.m. Israel time, which is 11:30 India time, opened the water flow into South Gaza. What we stopped, we're at war with the Hamas organization, and yet we're opening the water flow. I don't know what other country at war does that. We opened a humanitarian corridor. I don't know what other country does that without knowing anything about our hostages and without any claim for them being released. This is what we did this morning, because we are fighting Hamas. We're not fighting the people of Gaza. And war is horrible.
No, I take your point.
Is sad.
War is terrible. War is sad. Even so, an evacuation order asking refugees to leave within 24 hours, more than 1 million people being asked to leave Gaza. Many are suggesting that's a violation of human rights, of international law. What Israel is doing is actually, in a way, pushing the Palestinians into a situation where many people who are completely, as I said earlier, uninvolved with the war will also suffer. And is that what you want? Is that what you want? That you will have this large number of people being virtually forced out into what they already are calling an open prison?
To the south part, they can call it what they want to call it. But since 2005, and Hamas has had control of Gaza since 2007, you yourself said they had the Rafah crossing into Egypt. We had two corridors allowing international assistance and goods to come in on a daily basis. 18,000 people from Gaza daily came into Israel to work. So, they could, the Hamas terrorist organization can call what they want. They can show whatever pictures they want. They can now try to say that they're doing what they're doing. But the proof is on the ground. The proof is that IDF is telling them, please leave. We need to shoot down these rockets weapons. We need to shoot down this command center. There's a whole stockpile here of weapons we need to destroy. Please leave. So, and the Hamas, and by the way, many of the Hamas commanders don't even live in Gaza. They live abroad, and they tell these women and children, no, stay and die.
Can I ask?
What other country opens water again because people are in need of water, and Hamas, that's in charge of them, that is governing them, is not giving them water because they want them not to have water. So Israel is giving them water. This is the proof. 200, you're saying crimes against humanity, kidnapping children, raping and brutalizing women as we are speaking now.
Can I ask you therefore?
Crime against humanity?
Can I therefore ask you in conclusion, what is the end game here? I mean, are we heading for a prolonged offensive, which could also involve other countries possibly in the region, given Iran, Lebanon's interests? The fact is the US Secretary of State has been to several moderate Gulf states as well. None of them are openly condemning Hamas. Instead, they are calling for an end to Israeli strikes on Gaza.
Look, words aside and deeds aside, okay? Nobody except for the Iranian regime, who is also very, very clear about its goal for annihilating and destroying Israel. And they're, as I said, funding and helping Hamas. They're the main benefactor of Hamas, the same as Hezbollah in the north. Okay, nobody is helping Hamas or thinks they're not a terror organization. Hamas has been designated for years and years as a terrorist organization internationally. So Israel doesn't want war. I think we proved it again and again, and we proved it every time where we've suffered rockets and civilians have died and infrastructure was ruined. And we've always retaliated, in a very limited form, hoping that Hamas will understand that we're serious, hoping that Hamas would understand that we don't want them attacking and to stop. But it's been going on for years, and this is not the first terror attack we're suffering. This is the most heinous one. This is the most gruesome one. This brings us back to days that we don't want to remember, about burning people alive and brutalizing young girls. And they're still doing it. So obviously, as I said, Israel doesn't want war. We're all praying for peace in the region. Our war is only at Hamas terror organization, but we have to ensure our peace and security first and foremost.
Let me leave it there, Tammy. You've spoken very directly, and you've given us the sense of the Israeli government position. I appreciate you joining me here on the news today. Thank you very much for speaking
Thank
out.
you for your time.
Joining me from the United States, it's best-selling Palestinian author, activist, poet Susan Abul Hawa joins us, known to speak her mind out. Appreciate your joining us, Susan. Your first reactions to what has happened during the last week, the dastardly Hamas attack on Israeli civilians, and now the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which people in the area are facing at the moment. How do you see it as a writer and an activist who has often spoken out about Palestinian human rights?
Well, it's interesting how you frame the question. You start with a dastardly attack by Hamas and then a humanitarian crisis, as if the humanitarian crisis is an act of God. In fact, there have been dastardly attacks by Israel long before Hamas resisted. I don't accept that. I don't accept the framing that you were putting forth. As a formerly colonized people, you should know better. You should know better what colonial violence looks like. And it's really just so sad to see the way India has changed from the times of Nehru to now, to supporting a fascist settler colonial genocidal state after what you endured under the British for so long. Palestinians are an indigenous population who have been living under the yoke of profound racism, extreme violence for decades. Anything Palestinians do is resistance to that. Israel began by saying, talking about dead babies and rape. And all of that turned out to be lies. It is verified now that those are lies. But journalists around the world, and it sounds like including
Susan,
you, just accept this Israeli narrative as if it's fact.
No,
and
Susan.
It's still sticking.
No, Susan, let me pause you for a moment. The fact is, I certainly on this show have not put out a Western media narrative about babies being beheaded. We've gone by the facts on the ground. The fact is, Susan, like it or not, what happened on 7th October was, I use the word dastardly. More than 1,000 people are killed in a terror attack, many of them innocent civilians, non-combatants. How can I not use that word dastardly?
Why don't you use that? Why don't you use that dastardly adjective to describe the decades of Israeli attacks? Why don't you are using a Western narrative? Absolutely, you are.
No, I'm not.
Like, it's okay when Israel attacks every single day. Every single day, Israeli soldiers break into Palestinian homes, drag their children from their beds, and terrorize them. Every day, Israeli settlers backed by the Israeli military shoot and burn and harass and kill and attack Palestinians. Every day, Israeli military, so let me finish. You brought me on here to speak. No, let me speak. Every single day, Israel is destroying Palestinians.
Ma'am, Susan, the fact is Palestinian victimhood.
No, I want to hear you say that what Israel has been doing for 75 years is dastardly. Can you say that?
Of course I can say it.
No, just tell me if you think it's dastardly what Israel has been doing to us for 75 years. Tell me if you think it's dastardly that Israel has imprisoned 2.3 million human beings. 80% of them are refugees from those surrounding towns around Gaza, by the way. Tell me if it's not dastardly that these people are living in a literal concentration camp without access to electricity, water.
Susan, we can disagree over the usage of words. No one is denying that Israeli occupation of Gaza, and I use that word carefully. You call it genocide. Those are your words, genocidal attacks on Palestine. Palestinian victimhood, Palestinian tragedies cannot justify surely what happened on the 7th of October. All I'm saying is we seem to be therefore in this endless cycle of violence, of revenge.
Why would you not call it genocidal? They are literally, and Israeli commanders have admitted that they are targeting civilians. And there's a video of an Israeli commander saying that we are targeting civilians. He has said that. Why will you not call that genocide? They have attacked hospitals. They have attacked schools, universities, clinics, schools, whole high-rise apartment buildings. They have attacked water treatment plants, food factories. They have cut off water and food. They are people literally getting buried under the rubble of their homes. Over 900 children, 900 babies.
That is one side of the story.
And proof and photos of those babies, unlike what the Israeli claims, which I'm sure you have never seen or never verified the numbers that they are giving you. I am sure you have never seen all of these so-called 1,200 people. There has not been a single verified report of Israeli claims, yet it keeps being repeated as if it's fact, and you call it dastardly. But then this actual genocide that's happening to Palestinians, you won't even call it that. That is Susan, on you. That is on the media. It is dishonest, and you are participating in the manufacturing of consent for another Western imperial genocidal war. And we are paying the price. We have been paying the price for 75 years.
Susan,
how can India, a former colony that endured the unspeakable under the British, how can you now be saying what you're saying? That is the mind-blowing part, how quickly you have forgotten what the West has done to you. And now you are allying with a Western settler colonial state that has been devastating and terrorizing wholesale the indigenous Palestinian population for decades. under full view of the world.
Susan, the reason I have you on my show is to understand the Palestinian perspective, and I will come in a moment to the horrific humanitarian crisis that's ongoing in Gaza at the moment. I'm not escaping from that reality. I'm only saying there are different stories to be told here, that's all.
Stop calling it a humanitarian crisis. This is an intentional genocidal war. A humanitarian crisis is when an earthquake happens. It's when a tornado happens. That's a humanitarian crisis. When a nuclear power is literally bombing the most populated place in the world and bombing human beings and civilians and children and women and elderly and mothers and fathers, that is not a humanitarian crisis. That is genocide. Say it. You need to say it, and you need to be honest. You need to be honest with your viewers.
I use the word
being wiped off the map.
I use the word genocide, if I may say so, has to be used very, very carefully. But I just want to understand, since you've objected throughout this interview to my use of the word dastardly for what took place on October 7th, the Hamas attack, I want to tell you, how do you describe it? I want to ask you, what is your description then of what happened on the 7th of October?
There you go. It is only Israeli lives that matter in this narrative. I know you have seen the images. Thousands of
non-combatants died
year after year, slaughtered wholesale. But you want to talk about Israeli civilians.
Yes.
Who are actually, all of them are conscripted. All of them serve in the military. All of them are literally living in colonies that on the ancestral village of the people in Gaza. But nonetheless, let me finish, please. Nonetheless, Hamas fighters, there's videos of this, and they have released them. Hamas fighters were treated civilians humanely, and there have been at least 5 interviews with those civilians, the survivors in Israel,
Susan, they were
who
slaughtered.
attest to that. Every single one of them attests to the fact that the fighters treated them humanely.
How do you treat someone humanely when you kill them?
I watched a video of an Israeli survivor in one of the kibbutzes saying that Israeli soldiers shot Israeli civilians.
Oh, come on.
And this is from these Israeli survivors saying that. You need to investigate and you need to confirm what you're saying,
Susan,
because you're just repeating Israeli lies, and your viewers deserve better. The people deserve to hear the truth.
Susan, the people deserve...
You have proof. If you have actual proof of dead Israeli innocent people, then show it to your viewers. But to date, none of that has been revealed.
Susan, the fact is, there is enough evidence and more that non-combatant innocent civilians on both sides have been killed, and they all deserve our support, whether they are Israeli or Palestinian. You will agree with that, surely. All I am saying is that we need to hear voices of sanity and rationality who say that any form of violence against civilians is unacceptable.
Everybody, of course, absolutely. But why? But you are selectively giving that acknowledgement and that support, because you keep talking about October 7th as if that's where history starts, as if there hasn't been 75 years of wholesale slaughter of Palestinians. Why not start there? Why is it only Israeli lives that matter?
I didn't say that.
Muslims
Palestinian lives do matter, for God's sake.
And in Palestine have never had a problem with Jews. We have lived among them throughout the Arab world for as long as history has been recorded, and that is documented, that is uncontested. It is these European settler colonizers who have come from European countries and robbed us of everything, have destroyed our society, are literally have us living under the yoke of their boots on our necks. They have terrorized us wholesale, and you don't repeat. Why don't you tell your peers that? Why don't you tell them the truth?
I will tell them the truth, Susan. I will tell them the truth about Palestinian lives which have been lost, and innocent Israeli lives that have been lost. My question to you is, in the present scenario, how do we now move ahead? How do we ensure two states, a Jewish state and a Palestinian state, will coexist peacefully when all I see is so much of hatred and violence on either side? That's what I see, hatred and violence. Let me be very honest with you. An unwillingness to hear the other side.
First of all, when you say two sides, you make it sound like they're equal. There is one side that has all the power, all the guns, all the money, all the control, all the political support, all the political cover. And then there's another side that's an indigenous population that most of them are refugees who have been kicked out of their homes. They are a principally unarmed civilian population with a tiny little guerrilla armed resistance group that's principally also unarmed.
I have
inflict real damage.
Susan, with due regard, ma'am, I have a problem with the use of the word armed resistance for Hamas. I agree with a lot of what you've just said, but I have a problem with the use of the word armed resistance for a terror group that is now using violence against civilians to make to get its view across. I completely agree with you that what is happening with civilians in Gaza is unacceptable. But you must also concede, ma'am, that armed resistance cannot involve these kinds of crimes.
I want you to show proof to your viewers of the so-called murder of non-combatants. If you can show them proof of that, because to date we have seen no footage, we have seen no videos, we have seen no photographs. The only thing we have seen so far, the only thing that has been released so far has been.
We have dozens of photographs, Susan, of young Israeli kids who were killed in the attack. Let us look at this rationally now. How does one build bridges at the moment when I see so much of hate and violence around us? Yes, there is a propaganda war being waged on both sides, but I ask you the question again, ma'am. How do you reduce the hate that seems to have toxified the atmosphere?
Sir, let me... this is like somebody saying to Indians in the 30s, how do you build bridges when there's so much hate on both sides? That was never said, and nobody should ever say it. Nobody should have ever said to Black South Africans, how do you build bridges with the people who are literally slaughtering you and keeping you in hellholes? Nobody said that. We are not in a position to build anything.
What?
We have no power. We have nothing.
What is the way forward, Susan? What do you think then is the way forward? If you can't build bridges, if hatred and violence will result in this cycle of violence and revenge and retribution, what is the way forward, you think, to ensure that human lives, the minimal number of human lives are lost and Palestinians are restored their dignity, and Israel's existence is recognized?
The way forward is for the international community to finally stand up to this settler colonial genocidal state and force them to obey international law. That's how you move forward. Stop painting us like we're people, like we're monsters who just want to kill Jews. We want to live just like everybody wants to live. We deserve to live in dignity. We deserve to live in our homeland without being molested by people who think we are animals or garbage. We deserve that. We deserve universal dignity. We deserve freedom. We deserve not to live in a concentration camp without electricity, without water, without food, without the ability to travel, without the ability to study, to have dreams. We deserve that. And until the international community can stand up to Israel and make that clear to them, this is going to continue to happen. And this right now, the way you frame this, you are manufacturing consent to genocide, and that is what is happening. Tell the truth. That is all we're asking. Tell your viewers the whole truth. Tell them what has been happening before October 7th. Tell them what's happening now in Gaza. Just tell the truth.
Well, Susan, all I can tell you, as you've spoken so passionately, We try and tell the truth as we see it to all our viewers from both sides of this divide, and we will ensure, I promise you, all views, including yours, reach our viewers, and I appreciate that you've joined us and spoken there so angrily and passionately so that viewers recognize that this is not a one-sided narrative. I appreciate you joining me, ma'am, here on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you allowing your viewers to hear our voice. Thank you.
Let me turn from there to what is on the ground. You heard Susan there speaking very passionately about what she believes are war crime, genocide as she calls it, in Gaza. Now, most UN shelters in Gaza have run out of water. There is no electricity. The internet has been shut down. Medical supplies are running low, and hospitals have turned into morgues. Tonight's ground report comes from Gaza.
With every passing day, life in Gaza is becoming tougher and tougher. Finding clean drinking water in the Gaza Strip is a challenge. People are forced to stand in long lines for hours, as Israel has stopped water supply to more than 2.3 million Gazans. People are forced to drink salt water to survive.
Now we are filling in salt water. I'm ready to drink this water. What else can we do? We are forced to do this.
Muhammad has been volunteering to fill in canisters with salt water from a public tap and deliver them on a rickshaw to families.
Because of the large number of people inside the camp, there is no water. So I thought I would volunteer, come with a rickshaw and carry the water from the faraway areas, the dangerous areas, where there are agricultural lands and it's near the occupation in front of the empty lands.
Supply of food, medicine and power are also hit. Health officials in the Gaza Strip are storing the bodies of Palestinians killed in Israeli airstrikes in ice cream freezer trucks.
Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah is suffering from a severe lack of equipment. The hospital morgue can only take 10 bodies. So we have brought in ice cream freezers from the ice cream factories in order to store the huge number of martyrs coming in daily. Even with these freezers, the number exceeds the capacity of this main morgue of the hospital and alternative ones. And between 20 and 30 bodies are being kept in tents too.
The hospital, this hospital itself will possibly break down with the situation getting dire in terms of the needs and essential supplies needed by the hospital. This is a part of an integral part of how is the image in Gaza for the time being, especially for Gaza's hospitals.
Over 4 lakh Gazans have left their homes to move towards the south as Israel prepares for a possible ground invasion. These civilians are paying the price of a war they did not start. With Rami Al-Megari in Gaza Strip, Bureau Report, India Today.
Supreme Court today, in an important judgment, rejected a married woman's request to terminate her 26-week pregnancy, stating that the court could not approve an abortion request at this stage of pregnancy since there is no danger to the woman's life. The Supreme Court said the parents of the woman can make the decision on whether to give up the child for abortion, claiming that the pregnancy is of 26 weeks and 5 days and thus violates the Medical Terminancy Pregnancy Act. The apex court rejected the woman's petition. Anisha Mathur has more.
The Supreme Court attempting to strike a balance between the rights of a woman to choose what happens to her own body, and the provisions of the MTP Act which proscribe that right depending on the gestational period of the pregnancy. The court making it clear that while in India women do have the right to choose, it is also prescribed and proscribed by the MTP Act itself. However, the Chief Justice also making it clear that the larger debate on pro-life and pro-choice angles that is going on in the rest of the world does not affect India because India has its own law. In New Delhi, with cameraman Jagannath, this is Anisha Mathur for India Today.
Let's get more details. I'm joined by one of the advocates who was in that case, Ameya Vikrama Thanvi. Appeared on behalf of the centre in the Supreme Court. Ma'am, I want you to explain with greater detail what does the Supreme Court order mean when it rejects the plea of a married woman to abort her third pregnancy because it had crossed the 26-week mark. Can you explain why did the Supreme Court reject the plea and what does this order now mean in future for potential abortion cases?
So, thank you for having me. The Supreme Court order is essentially a reiteration of the law that we already have, which is the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, which is the statute that governs the entire law concerning abortion. Now, what the Supreme Court has said that we have a statute in place which permits abortion without any hindrance, without any questions, up to a certain limit. And beyond that time period, there are only two exceptions, which is there is a danger to the life of the fetus or of the, and in those exceptional circumstances beyond the period of 24 weeks, and a termination of pregnancy will be allowed.
So
that the Supreme Court has essentially balanced the right of the woman who is bearing the child and the child that is to be born.
So essentially you're saying that it will only be in exceptional circumstances after the 24-week period that an abortion will be allowed. To that extent, in that situation, the woman's freedom of choice is greatly reduced. Am I clear?
That would be a very broad statement. I wouldn't agree with that. The Supreme Court has said, like every other freedom, this freedom is also reasonably restricted. The Supreme Court has had to balance the rights here. See, even with right to life, it's not an absolute right. There is no right in our constitution which is absolute. We have that established. And in a democracy, statutes are a voice of the public, which essentially say what is the mandate of the public with regards to different issues. In this specific case, the right of a woman to choose what happens to her body has been upheld by the Supreme Court previously, and now only a clarification has come that this is not an absolute right.
But what it effectively means Ms. Thanvi, is because one of the lawyers argued in the court that an unborn child or an unborn fetus does not have overriding rights to life. The court seems to have rejected that and made it very clear that this right to life, while not being an absolute right, is subject to the rules of the Medical Pregnancy Termination Act. Am I correct?
Correct. In fact, the court clarified that we have our own law, and in the absence of a challenge to that law, and in the absence of striking down of that law, we have to act within the four corners of the law of the land as it exists.
But does that in a way circumscribe the term life under Section 5 of the Act? Because the court seems to have interpreted it that this cannot be decided by the pregnant woman. Am I right in saying that the right to choice, pro-choice activists will say this is limiting the right of the woman?
No, I will disagree with that. The court has essentially said that it is ultimately it is after the examination of the woman. It was medical advice which governed the court's order. It's not a sweeping. There cannot be a sweeping generalization that in absolutely no case a woman will not be allowed to choose to terminate her pregnancy beyond a certain time limit. Mm-hmm. There are certain cases, there are certain exceptional circumstances prescribed within our statute, within our law, which still permit women to choose. But in this given case, it was in the light of the facts of the case and after examination by the medical board that the court reached its decision.
So very quickly in conclusion, the freedom of choice remains, but it cannot be absolute. Am I right? Broadly.
You are absolutely correct, sir. Freedom of choice remains, and it is ultimately a woman's choice to decide what she wants to do with her body.